In the same way, Bridget is about the gap between how people feel they're expected to be and how they actually are. Pride and Prejudice is about, I think, the powerlessness economically of women at that time, that all they could do was choose to say no to a proposal.
Well, hi, and welcome to the PBS Books Readers Club.
Today, we're thrilled to welcome New York Times bestselling author Helen Fielding to talk about her international phenomenon, Bridget Jones' Diary.
Originally inspired by Pride and Prejudice, Bridget Jones' Diary reimagines the classic love story through the lens of a woman of the 90s navigating life, love, and unrealistic resolutions.
It's satirical, sharp, and full of heart, poking fun at the pressures women face to have it all, while capturing the universal awkwardness of trying to grow up gracefully.
Well, as we celebrate Jane Austen's 250th birthday this year, Bridget Jones offers a fresh, funny way to revisit the timeless appeal of Mr. Darcy in a perfect pick that's both a light-hearted summer read and a social satire that gives us plenty to talk about. Hi, I'm Fred Nahat here with Lauren Smith, joined by literary expert and award-winning writer Princess Weeks and our resident librarian and PBS Books National Director, Heather Marie Montilla.
Before we delve into this book, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts on Bridget Jones' Diary in the comments. Have you read it yet? Seen the movie 100 times? We love reading and responding to your comments in the chat. You can also pose a question for other readers. Book clubs are so much more fun when we all get involved.
Well, and be sure to join the PBS Books Readers Club Facebook group to connect with other book enthusiasts, share recommendations, and discuss your favorite reads all month long.
It's the best book club ever. These folks give amazing recommendations. Great stories are meant to be shared. So click share on Facebook or YouTube right now. Friends, do not let friends miss out on great books, and your support means the world to us.
All right, so let's discuss Helen Fielding's charming novel, Bridget Jones' Diary. What did everybody think?
It is a great summer read. It is light, it is fun, it's a cultural icon. This book is a cultural icon for all of us, actually. Yeah. I think when I think about the unique writing style of the time, how revolutionary it was, and then really it echoes for so many of us, our life. And then where are we today? I'm just interested to get into it and where the inspiration came from.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like, as you know, I'm a huge fan of Jane Austen. I love Pride and Prejudice. And so it was so fun getting to really focus on the similarities between the source material and this, especially in the choice to sort of make Bridget's mother Lydia and Mrs. Bennet at the same time. That was just so, it blew my mind of watching that entire thing unfold. And just like Jane Austen sometimes gets reduced and we forget that it's a satire and really touching on the issues that women face at the time, I feel the same way about Bridget Jones. Mm-hmm. I felt like at the time, I don't think people really understood how toxic that era was for young women in terms of body culture. And I think people took it at face value and not seeing that it was really critiquing those ideas. And I think calling it chick lit sort of demeans the fact that, like, no, she had a perspective that she was really highlighting. And I think her and Jane both have that on lock.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, they say that good writers borrow, great writers steal, extraordinary writers sample Jane Austen, proven once again in this book that goes back a number of years, but it's so much fun to reconsider it, to reflect on it. This is a book that I'm really looking forward to getting into with the author.
Well, it is really fun to compare Pride and Prejudice and Bridget Jones. And, you know, like you said, there are some critiques of the work. Looking back on it, you know, we don't want our 30-year-old women talking about their calories in their journal. That's not the number one thing that we're thinking about, but it is a reflection of the time. And it also speaks to the format of the book because it is written as a diary, which is really interesting. And you write different things in your diary than you put on your social media, right? And I think it's just a unique spin on a novel and getting like really into the little things that are going on in your head that you might not want everybody to know about. So
For good reason.
I think it's really smart.
Exactly.
Agree.
Brilliant. Well, the other thing about me being from the 90s, it's important to reflect and to reconsider. But also, these villains, no matter what century they're in, they kind of throw off the same gross vibe, right?
Yes.
So it's a universality of gender politics, and your point about the 90s is so key, because that's what it was. That was the zeitgeist. And
Yeah.
we lived through it and working to change through that.
Yeah, it's a truth universally acknowledged that it sucks to be a woman sometimes.
It's hard. It is. Jane
It's
knew
hard.
it, and Helen knows it.
Exactly.
And we know it. Yes.
But we love you, Fred.
Well, I appreciate that. Author Helen Fielding is standing by to join us in just a moment, talk more about Bridget Jones. But first, let's talk about how you can join the conversation. Sign up for our PBS Books e-newsletter at pbsbooks.org/subscribe. There you will find exclusive book recommendations, author interviews, and so much more. It's the best way to get the latest book updates right into your inbox.
And did you know that our PBS Books YouTube channel features hundreds of author interviews and fascinating literary stories? Geraldine Brooks, Percival Everett on his Pulitzer Prize winner James, Kristen Hanna on The Women, Shelby Van Pelt on Remarkably Bright Creatures. Our book friends are all there on YouTube. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe.
And if you love the PBS Books Readers Club, consider supporting your local PBS station. Now more than ever, this program and your PBS station are counting on support from viewers just like you and me. So please, if you can, visit pbsbooks.org/donate to make a gift.
pbsbooks.org/donate will take you right to your local station's giving page. There, among many other thank you gift options, you can support PBS Books directly by selecting one of our special gifts, like the PBS Books Readers Club book bag. I love this thing. It has a zipper so that it's very safe to carry around. You can put so many books in it. You can haul it home from the library. It is amazing. It's so cute. It's got a shoulder strap, or you can use it as a handbag. I should be on QVC at this point. I love this thing. It's stylish, it's durable, and it's your new go-to sidekick for toting all your latest reads, e-reader, laptop, and whatever else your literary adventures require. And it's even got our logo, so you can sport your love for public media.
We also have the official PBS Books Readers Club mug, just like the one we have right here on the set. It says, "My weekend is booked," and of course, isn't that the truth?
Yeah, it's definitely the truth every weekend.
The fun doesn't stop there, because as a PBS member, you get access to PBS Passport, the member exclusive section on the free PBS app, where you can stream full seasons of incredible PBS shows, including Jane Austen-inspired favorites like Miss Austen, which tells the story of Jane's sister Cassandra and why she burned all those letters. Death Comes to Pemberley, which imagines what happens to Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy when their happy marriage is brought to an abrupt halt after a murder takes place at Pemberley. And of course, Sanditon, based on Jane Austen's final and unfinished novel. And now let us welcome in our guest author, Helen Fielding. Welcome to the PBS Books Readers Club.
Hi, it's lovely to be here.
Well, it's been almost 30 years since you first wrote and released Bridget Jones' Diary. Take us back to the beginning. How did the idea for Bridget and her character come to be? And what's it like looking back on this 30-year journey?
Well, it was all quite a surprise, really, because I'd been trying to be an earnest literary novelist, and I'd written a novel set in a refugee camp in the Sudan. And I was trying to be a political journalist on The Independent in London and working on the political desk. But I was also single in my 30s, and they wanted me to write a column as, single life in your 30s. And I said, no, that's embarrassing, but I will make someone up. So we just did it completely spontaneously. We took a picture of the girl who was working as an assistant in the office. We sort of banged it up that day. I already kind of had the voice because I've been playing with this character for a while. I didn't tell anyone it was me. The only person who knew was my editor. And I assumed they'd stop it after 6 weeks, but I would get some money to pay the rent. And so it was a complete surprise that people started writing letters and enjoying it. And one of my best friends told me about the column, and I said, "What do you think?" She said, "I think it's funny." And so I was like, "Yay." And I said, "Tracy, I wrote it." And then ever since, I've been boasting about the column. But I think it was the fact that I didn't think anyone was going to read it, that allowed me to be emotionally honest in a way that I wouldn't have been otherwise. I would have been self-conscious.
Kind of like when you write a diary.
Exactly.
You never think anyone will read it.
Perfect, exactly. And I think the framing of the diary is one of the most interesting things about just how it's all put together, that personal touch of knowing who Bridget is. So I kind of was wondering, how did you keep the form of a diary while still telling the story of Pride and Prejudice? Were there any sort of structural limitations that you were coming up against that you had to work around when coming up with the book?
Well, really, it wasn't meant to be a book, you see. It was just meant to be a column for a short time. And I was writing another rather earnest tome about, sort of about economic and cultural divides in the Caribbean. And my doctor took me out for a drink and we got a bit plastered. And she said, "This book is unreadable, Helen." It was the second book in my second book deal. And I said, "Yeah, I know." And he said, "Why don't you do Bridget Jones instead?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." It was as casual as that. But all I had was all these columns and no structure. So the BBC was showing Pride and Prejudice at the time. Um, and I, like the rest of the country, was in love with Colin Firth. So he started being in the columns. And then I thought, well, why don't I just steal the plot from Pride and Prejudice? I don't think Jane Austen would mind. And anyway, she's dead. It's a really, really good plot. I mean, it's been adapted so many times. And, there's Pride and Prejudice and zombies and Mr. Darcy the vampire, and however many times it gets reinvented, that plot, it pretty much always works. It's very much a foolproof plot. So it wasn't that hard to follow. I mean, there is a bit in Pride and Prejudice where Darcy disappears, but it is a bit tricky when you lose your through line like that. But apart from that, I thought it was fine. You know, Daniel was Wickham, Darcy was Darcy, Bridget was Elizabeth Bennet. So I was happy, grateful, and still am to the plot.
Well, taking it to the present day, understanding the through line and the impetus from Austen. In 1996, I think I was 32. I have 4 sisters. I understand all this vulnerability. It captured that moment. I think what was revolutionary about it was, even though it was a different time, it was exposing that vulnerability. And I have to be honest, the diary entries make me want to smoke.
Don't start now.
It captures that. It captures that essence. So blending that, the zeitgeist of the time in the 90s, I guess, with that Austen sensibility, how were you able to navigate that process? And why do you think that Austen's influence just keeps people coming back?
Well, I think the thing about Jane Austen is that it is her 250th anniversary this year. She was just very, very, very good at being a novelist. I mean, she wrote the original version of Pride and Prejudice when she was 17. And it was just innate. She knew about plot, she knew about character, she knew about dialogue, she knew about theme. I always think the thing that elevates a book from just another novel is, what is it actually about beyond plot and the story? What is it about? In the same way Bridget is about the gap between how people feel they're expected to be and how they actually are, Pride and Prejudice is about, I think, the powerlessness economically of women at that time. That all they could do was choose to say no to a proposal. Unless they had their own money, they just sat and waited to be asked. And they were, it was pretty boring and pretty powerless positions. So I think she manages to tell you a very entertaining love story, but she's so much more than a romantic novelist. The endings are just about where you choose to stop the story. She picks that little slice to make it a good narrative, but she's actually telling you a huge amount about the political situation, the sociological situation, and human nature. But she's very funny.
I remember talking with, we interviewed Jill Hornby, who wrote Miss Austen, and she put it so perfectly, like Jane Austen in that time, for a woman to say no to a proposal like someone like Mr. Darcy, like marriage wasn't really romance, it was a rescue, is how she put it.
Exactly.
And so it was revolutionary, this idea to
have your own autonomy in that choice.
Yeah.
And she says no twice to like 2 very viable candidates because she just wants love.
So I know Fred talked about how important this book and how revolutionary this book was. I was 17 when this book came out. And it's really interesting because, tracking your weight, thinking you're too fat, tracking how many drinks you had, all of that I feel was very much my life when I first read the book. And it's so different reading it at 40, let's say 45. And
45 it is.
45 it is. My daughter thinks I'm 29, I think. But all of that being said is, because part of it is perspective, because as I read it now, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's body shaming. And then I started thinking about maybe, has society changed? And what I want to ask you is, if you were writing Bridget Jones, the original, now,
As a 30-year-old.
yes, as a 30-year-old, how would it be different? What would you put in it to make it different?
Well, it's quite hard to answer that because the best advice I had about writing was write about what you know. And I don't know what it's like to be a 30-year-old now. I know more about what it's like to be a Gen Z now because my kids are that age. And what I do know is that there is quite a big Gen Z audience for Bridget. And when I go to school or something, probably 40% of the audience is 18 to 25-year-olds coming with their mum. I think there are a lot of reasons why they are identifying with Bridget. I think that they're the first generation since the Second World War generation to live through seeing the world fall apart. So they're already quite aware and sort of shaken and fragile. And so I think partly as a result of that, they're much more willing to share emotionally with each other their vulnerabilities and their need for companionship, their need for the ability to laugh at yourself, their need for community. And just as Bridget had her cozy rituals, with Bridget it was vodka and ice cream and sitting on the sofa and a little group of friends. With the Gen Zs, it's all matcha and potions and protein powder and magnesium salts and you still have sort of, the bunny ears and the slippers and the PJs and the friendship groups. And I think they have the body image thing is so much more difficult for them because they have social media. So they're faced with all these filtered people. On top of that, they have the shame that they shouldn't be worrying about it in the first place because of the body positivity movement.
Right.
The
But yeah, at least
contradictions.
Bridget didn't have that.
Yeah, and having to deal with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's I love the fact that they come to readings and they want to talk and ask about Bridget. And I love the fact that they relate to her emotional honesty, I think.
Well, as someone who is single in their 30s, I can say that there's a lot of overlap still. I think that's kind of also the Pride and Prejudice storyline. It is like, well, you're getting up there. When are you going to get married? When are you going to settle down? And I think that's kind of like the ultimate universality of your eggs are going to start crackling soon. And I think reading it now, when I first watched Bridget Jones and read the book, I was much younger, and I was like, I have so much time. And then all of a sudden I'm here at 33, I like myself so much better. I'm so much happier, but some voice in my head, society, is telling me but are you happy? If you don't have a partner? And I think that's kind of what this book does. It touches on that inner voice that's kind of telling you you're doubting yourself, but then you question it because when she does lose weight, everyone's like, but I thought you looked better before. Yeah. And it's just
She said, I feel like a scientist whose entire life's work has been a mistake because when she lost weight, everyone thought she just looked tired and old. But I hope that it did change things a bit. There is this notion of the singleton, a valid notion of why women would be single in their 30s. And also, honestly, with the new movie, I was really trying to talk about community and how it's your friends that get you through. Because this idea that you are supposed to live with one other person and some children in a single unit building is just, I don't quite know why people think that is the norm because it isn't. It's not what everyone does or what you should necessarily aspire to. Because when I look at the people around me, it's not even 50-50. I think more people that I know are single or, you know, single mothers or are slightly sort of mixed up family than living in those normal old-fashioned units. So we're all kind of conditioned to think that's what we should be doing, but it's sort of nonsense, really.
As a parent, right, a lot of this book centers on a parent's expectations of their daughter. And I wanted to ask about your expectations of or on your kids, and basically how writing the book influenced your expectations or your consciousness of your expectations on your children.
Well, there's a scene that I've tried and tried to get into the movies, and one day I will get it into a movie, or maybe the musical if I make the musical. But it's the scene where Bridget confronts her mum and says, "Why do you keep trying to change me? Why are you always saying you're wearing the wrong thing, you're doing the wrong thing, you're living in the wrong way? I just want you to support me." And the mum sort of cracks and says, "Oh, Bridget, I'm sorry, I'm so very sorry." And then they sort of really, really know each other properly. And I suppose as I've got older with Bridget, I understand the mum's perspective better. And I think Bridget's mum grew up in an age where she wasn't bombarded with all these different ideas about how you could possibly be as a woman. She'd grown up in one place with one set of values. And so she was very confident in a way about how things should be, and sort of threw that at her daughter. And I would really like to see her regret that. And I think it's in one of the books, I get mixed up. But she realizes that she she made her daughter insecure by not leaving her be, not just letting her wear what she wanted and be who she wanted.
Yeah. When I was reading Bridget Jones, I almost felt like the character of Mrs. Bennet, Elizabeth's mom in Pride and Prejudice, was almost like part of her inner monologue. Like it's almost ingrained into her personality because she was so self-deprecating too to her own self, probably because of the way that her mother treated her.
Yep.
And it was almost like her voice was a strange mix of Elizabeth and Mrs. Bennet and a little bit of Lydia too, because she was chaotic and sometimes she wanted to just like go do her own thing. I'm curious, like, if any of that lined up for you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose when I was stealing Pride and Prejudice, I conflated Mrs. Bennet and Lydia into Bridget's mum, and in the book, she ran off to Portugal with someone called Julio. And Benny Hill like farce at the end when they're all running in and out of the house with straw donkeys and policemen and things. When you actually look at Jane Austen's life, her parents' marriage was a love match, interestingly. They didn't have much money, but the parents did love each other. I think that Mr. Bennet in Pride and Prejudice was quite based on Jane Austen's father, who had a huge library, no money, but a huge library, and really supported her in her writing. But I don't think her mum was like Mrs. Bennet. I don't think she was so crass and so pushy and sort of annoying. Jane Austen's just so good at making up these characters like, Mr. Collins, the ghastly suit Charlotte Luke goes for. And he says, "I shall do my best to demean myself in front of Lady Catherine de..." Always gets his words wrong. She's so good on dialogue. She's so precise.
Every time I revisit Pride and Prejudice, my feelings about Mr. and Mrs. Bennet change, because I used to be very much like, "Oh, I hate Mrs. Bennet. She's so pushy." But then I think, but Mr. Bennet, why didn't you put money aside for your daughters?
Yeah.
I do think about how, as we keep revisiting Pride and Prejudice, like realizing that like even she is reacting to society.
She's desperate.
And her husband has done nothing to help, but still gets to be like, "But I'm the fun dad who lets you do whatever." Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, he was kind of irresponsible. And Mrs. Bennet was just, because the only way those girls could survive was through marriage. They had no family money. But I mean, Jane Austen, Jane Austen. I think she fell in love when she was 18 and flirted too much, and the parents took the guy away. Then she loved someone else who died. And then this guy called, try not to laugh, Harris Big Wither, proposed to her.
Nothing can brace you for that.
She said yes. And it was a dark night of the soul. And in the morning, she said no. She changed her mind. And she could have saved the whole family because he had money. But she thought, I don't like him. I don't want to marry him. And so she took a punt on her ability as a writer that she could keep the family. And she went for it. So she was a real original feminist. She really was.
Can I ask, when did you first read Jane Austen as a girl?
I think I was about 15, and I used to read everything. Like, I didn't distinguish. There was no high-low thing with me. I'd read like Jackie Collins or, I just didn't distinguish. And I still don't like the distinction between literary fiction and popular fiction. I think that's a very late invention because even in the 19th century, Dickens is both things. Austen is both things. You want to turn the page, and it's about real truths about life. But a lot of the books I was given at school, like Tristram Shandy and Moby Dick, I found really unreadable. And then I got Pride and Prejudice, and I just thought, this is incredible. These are real women. And Lizzie Bennet is the type of woman I want to be. Like, she's strong, she's funny, she's got integrity, she's dignified, she won't compromise. She won't compromise on love. She's a good friend, she's a good sister. She sees things really clearly, she's really perceptive, and she's really brave. And I thought it was amazing to just come across a character like that in a book that seemed so fresh and modern. And Darcy, I mean, what a great character. I always got him mixed up with Captain Von Trapp. Very simply Captain Von Trapp and Maria and Darcy and Elizabeth.
Yeah, listen, having given Jane Austen her due and stepping lightly in reverse from irresponsible and fun dads, I couldn't help but think, as I reflected upon this work, revisiting this all this time, the similarities stick with me to Les Miserables and Victor Hugo. Hugo started out serialized, Les Mis. Mm-hmm. It became, of course, a stage play. Then it became a musical. Hopefully you'll get your musical one of these days. And then the comparison to Bridget Jones, similarly a serialized content platform. Then all of the movies. I guess the question is, did you ever expect all of this cultural phenomenon that now is Bridget Jones?
No, not for a single second. It came completely over my shoulder by surprise. And that's the kind of wonderful thing about it. And I don't think it would ever have happened if I had been trying to make it happen. But I think to maintain, if you like, a sort of brand or a franchise for 30 years, you can't do it if you actually are like Bridget. Because as soon as people realize that there's sort of money in it, then there's lots of people who want to take it over. And the thing is, it's a franchise, but what is the franchise? There's no superheroes, there's no fast cars crashing into each other, there's no wizards, there's nothing except just a point of view in one woman. So I have to fight quite hard to protect that and not to exploit it, not to sort of mess it up. So whilst I wasn't expecting it, I did make sure I kept the copyright when it was first sold as a movie. And it's a bit like having a child, when the movie's been made, you have to hand over your baby, but you're still watching them. If it gets to be a teenager and it starts looking at crystal meth, you're like, no.
We have to stop.
But yeah, just the name Bridget Jones, it infers so much.
Yeah,
cultural icon. A meme today, but it's a cultural phenomenon. It means vulnerability. It means pluckiness. It means stick-to-itiveness. It means dealing with a mother like so many of us have had. So yeah, it just means so much after all these years. It's really quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
I love to dig into your journey as a writer like a little bit more. I'm sure there's been some highs and lows. Talk about what that journey has been like for you.
Well, I think I always felt that words were the thing I sort of knew what to do with. And anyone who's seen me cook knows that it's not that far from the movies.
I haven't, but I would love to.
No, you really wouldn't. But I mean, I can actually show you here. There's a chicken that earlier today I just found in the oven, which
Oh my
I
God.
realised actually been since I think Friday. So I just forgot. But
That's fantastic.
quite impractical. But I did feel like I sort of knew what I could do with words. But I wrote a novel when I was about 21 for an inexpensive romance company called Mills and Boon in London, and had high hopes. It's called Fires of Zanzibar, and they sent me a letter saying they couldn't use it because neither my characters nor my story were up to the high standards demanded by the Mills and Boon reader. And I was devastated. But when I read it back, I kind of got it because it was a doctor and nurse romance set in a refugee camp in Zanzibar. And the last line was him pulling her roughly to him. And then she looked up at him questioningly and tremblingly. And he said, "It's all right. It isn't a snake." And so I they thought I wasn't taking it seriously. But actually, I was. I just thought that was a funny line to end on. But
You were ahead of your time. They would eat that up. Book Talk would eat that up right now.
I was just sort of, I was devastated by my rejection. I didn't write another work of fiction for 6 years, but I did work at the BBC in television, and I did work in newspapers and documentaries, and they're all different sorts of writing. And you have to lose your ego and get cut by the inch, really, if you're writing for a newspaper. Unless you write to length, they'll just cut the last paragraph off. So I did learn a lot about writing in different styles and losing your ego a bit. Um, and then I did write a novel another novel set in a refugee camp, but I was a bit more careful about what I wrote, called Celeb. It was about celebrities and famine and how they sort of interdepended at that point in the late 80s. Um, and that got good reviews, but nobody bought it. No, actually, when Bridget came out and everyone was saying, "This is so silly and tiresome," I was like, "Well, my last one was about a woman running a refugee camp, but you didn't buy that one."
Well, since you've done all these different kind of writing over time and you've worked on the screenplay for the Bridget Jones movies as well, how do you think your writing process has changed since you first started? And how do you see Bridget now compared to when you first started writing her?
I think with Bridget, I see her as Renee when I'm writing now. When I first started writing, I was just seeing through my eyes. But as soon as Renee got involved, then I started writing more for her or as her. I don't know. But I really like Renee. I think she's got a lot in common with Bridget in that she's very soft and gentle on the outside, and she's genuinely nice. And, on set, she knows everyone's name. She never loses it. She's all those things. She's very funny. Like I remember on the last set of filming, I was really excited about meeting Leo Woodall. She'd already met him. And we were like, kind of planning what I was going to say. And then he suddenly appeared and I'd got my hair attached to Renee's microphone. So we were just like,
Oh my God.
but she's also very astute, Renee. She's very intelligent and smart and works really hard. She's totally on it. So that's made it easier for me to write her through the years because I've got the person that I know quite well now that I sort of working with a bit, especially on the films. So I think also I don't churn one out every year. I suppose I could have been an annual author, but I only ever write one when it just kind of happens. Like Mad About the Boy wasn't meant to be a Bridget novel when I started it. It was just about being a single mother, and it just sort of turned into one. So I think there's it's really important to have some integrity with it, because if you don't, no one's going to like it. You can tell, you know, if you just have somebody burning things and falling over and leaving chickens in the oven. I mean, who would do that?
It's very Elizabeth Bennet of you.
In terms of, you've spoken a lot that I think you said at 21 you were writing, you were a journalist at times. Did you always know you wanted to be a writer, or did that realization come later, and did you know you wanted to be a novelist per se?
No, I always knew I wanted to be a novelist. I always did. And I grew up in industrial Yorkshire in the north of England. I mean, not obviously very different from Detroit, but it was a one industry town where I lived. They made the cloth for coal miners' jackets, and there were 36 mills. So it was pretty sooty. And we used to go away in the summer. My parents used to take us in a camper van to the continent, and we used to go to Italy and France and camp. And I saw swimming pools and sunshine. And I used to read Jackie Collins, and I thought, if I was a writer, I could have a swimming pool. I don't want to seem that I'm not literary or anything, but it was a sort of dream that I could have this different life where I wouldn't have to go to work every day, and there'd be glamour and sunshine. And so when I first went on a book tour and ended up in Los Angeles, I realized that for the price of a flat in London then, I could buy a house with a swimming pool.
Do you have a swimming pool?
Yes!
Yay!
Good. We
Good
made
for
it.
you. We're coming over.
Complete one. It was like a film set, and as soon as it rained, the whole thing collapsed. So I was completely taken for a ride. It was so LA. But still. Um, but it wasn't only the swimming pool that made me right. I sort of feel if I'm not writing, it's like, that feeling when you go out without your handbag.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not expecting you all to say yes, but
I do.
Fred, that
You have a man.
Kind of like my phone.
I was gonna
I
say.
don't expect you've ever forgotten your handbag. You maybe.
What does
Princess.
that mean?
Definitely.
right, or something like that. I just feel if I'm not writing, there's something wrong. I'm not grounded. So I always want to be writing something. Even there's a lot of novels I've started and thrown away after 5 chapters or something because they're just not good enough. But I'm always writing something.
When you are writing, like, what's your ideal setup? Do you write in the morning? Are you a night owl? Do you like to play music? Like, is there, aside from the chicken in the pot, is there something you always return to process-wise?
Well, I always want to be that person you read about in magazines that wakes up at 5, has a lightly boiled egg, writes for 3 hours, and then plays tennis. Or Ernest Hemingway, with his writing for 3 hours, then going sport fishing, then getting blind drunk and starting again. But
In that order.
I'm a bit disorganized. I'm very nomadic. I move from place to place in the house, or I go to a cafe or whatever at certain stages. But once I get into a flow state, then I really don't want to stop. And what I'll do is I'll work from 10 till 6, 5 days a week, and just keep doing that. So I think you have to do that. You have to tell your mind, like a muscle, we are going to do the writing now, whether you want to or not. And then I stop in the evening and start again the next morning. And I find that if I try and cheat and write in the evening, then the next morning my system's like, we're not doing it. You made us work last night. So I have to be quite like that about it. I mean, obviously, when my kids were little, they couldn't really do that. So then I used to write at night, and they used to creep down in their pajamas and sort of snuggle up to me on the sofa. It was quite sweet. But I need a rhythm to write to. And it depends what stage you're at. Like, there's a stage where you're just creating loads of material, which is quite chaotic. And then you're pulling it all together. But then when you start editing, it's like embroidery, very complicated to get if you're doing comedy, to get the themes. It's like stitching threads into something. And if you decide it's wrong, you can't just cut it. You've got to pull the whole thread out and fix it and throw it back in again. So then I need to really have a quieter space and concentrate. But some days I just last Friday, it was the hottest day of the year, and I just stopped it and just went out and got an ice cream and
I think Hemingway said, "Write drunk, edit sober."
Yeah.
I think that's his
Oh
famous.
my God,
Yes,
that's
that's
not like qualified PBS Books advice. Just throw that out there.
Another time.
Not at this hour. We were just wondering, since you are a voracious reader of so many different genres, have you read anything that you really enjoy, that you've really enjoyed lately? We'd love to know what you are reading.
well, I would particularly recommend a little slim volume called Hemingway on Writing, which is a collection of snippets from his letters, either to Scott Fitzgerald or Maxwell Perkins, all these different writers. But he's so good on just little bits of advice. There's some of them, I mean, there's one I read the other day that made me laugh, which said, you cannot write in the summer months, it's far too hot. Or in the spring or fall. And I was thinking, wait a minute, that only leaves the winter and you spend the whole time in Paris getting drunk. So when do you write, Ernest? But he is, I like reading that, and I have that with me all the time. I like reading classics. I like reading, things like The Great Gatsby, The Grapes of Wrath, Thomas Hardy, Catch-22, all the books that have sort of stood the test of time, I think have done so for a reason. But, I usually read the Women's Prize, the British Women's Prize nominations. The one I liked last year was called Enter Ghost. And that was very good. I like Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Have you read that? I thought that was great because it was really about modern love and it was set in the gaming world, but it had so many profound quotes in it. And I always go through and like highlight quotes I think are good and put post-it notes in. Obviously, I'd never steal them, but I just like to.
Only Jane. We only steal from Jane.
Exactly. She's not. It's public domain. It's free for all.
Writers who, like Scott Fitzgerald, if you look at Gatsby, you think, oh, this is a story about, glamour and parties and whatever. But what it's actually about is the failure of the American dream. But also, when you read it, that narrator says so many really astute things about people and human nature. And, he'll say he had a smile which made you feel that your view of the world was the right one and that, everything would come to you and you were right about everything and it was eternally reassuring. I'm paraphrasing, but he really, really wrote well, I think. He was at his peak in that book. And there's Ernest Hemingway kept telling him, stop being such a whinger when he was doing the next one, just enjoy the success you've had and stop complaining about the critics and things.
So we've been talking a lot about the books that you have read, I think more in your adulthood. If you can think back to your childhood, was there a book or a series of books that you read as a child that inspired your love of reading and writing?
Yeah, there's a writer called Enid Blyton who I fear may have been cancelled for something that I don't know what it was, but something she possibly couldn't have known would have got her into trouble, like 70 years later. She wrote lots and lots of children's books, but she wrote a series of boarding school books about girls at boarding school. And the Mallory Towers books, and I thought those were really good because they were about women, women sort of navigating, moving towards being adults, navigating being with each other, navigating their aspirations and their relationships. And I was really inspired by those, I think. And, other writers like Jilly Cooper, you might not know, but she wrote a book called Rivals that was recently made into a TV series. I loved Thomas Hardy. Apart from the ending of Jude the Obscure, which is possibly the worst ending of a book I've ever seen in my life.
That book was so harrowing.
Children kill themselves and leave a suicide note saying, because we were too many, spelt wrong. And that was bad ending. But his books were great, especially Far from the Madding Crowd. That's a very well constructed book. I'd like to copy that one.
It's public domain. Go for it. I wish, like, I think about Jude the Obscure and Tales of the D'Urbervilles are my favorite books, but like they have such bleak endings. Who would want to remake them?
I think happy endings are all about where you choose to stop the story. So stop it at a happy place and make everyone happy, because life is tough enough anyway.
What I think.
Absolutely,
yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
It just means that's where you chose to stop. Imagine if Jane Austen had followed Darcy and Elizabeth into that marriage.
Well, you get death at Pemberley. That's what you get.
Yeah.
Red-
Murder mysteries and
So, Helen, out of all the books, I guess, you've read or even written, is there a character you'd love to have tea with, and why?
Um, I would like to have a glass of orange wine with Jane Austen, because she liked orange wine. She liked having fun. Um, I would like to have the cocktails served by P.G. Wodehouse, and I would like the other two guests to be Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway. I think that'd be a fun night, don't you?
yeah.
Oh,
I think that's
Yeah.
a wild party.
that sounds like my kind of party.
I know. I'm such a Hemingway apologist. What's the best advice you've ever received, either about writing or life advice?
Ooh, how many can I give you?
As many
As
as
you
you
like.
like.
So write as if you're writing a letter to a friend, because I think the most important thing is to find your voice. And sometimes if I talk to like colleges or students, I do say, don't, whatever you do, suddenly write a huge, great novel or a screenplay and expect it to be made. Start small, we started with newspapers, or start with Substack, or start just with different ways of finding your voice, because the reader is going to have to spend an awful lot of time with you, and you want them to enjoy that voice. Write about what you know. With characters, if you are going to put someone you know into your book, first of all, ask them, but secondly and crucially, make them really physically attractive.
10,000%. Yeah.
On life lessons, I think there's one thing someone said to me once: if one person tells you you look like a horse, ignore them. If 6 people tell you, buy a saddle. And this is one of the lines that was cut from the most recent movie that I made a fuss about. But I think it's the doctor, Emma Thompson, says it to Bridget. But, if one person says, oh, you need to get out of the house and get a job and get your life back, you can ignore them. But if everybody is saying it, it's like you've got a point. I think for social anxiety, and again, I think about this with the Gen Zs, because anxiety is a big thing for that generation. I can't remember who said to me, no one is thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves, just like you. And I, you go to those parties and you just want to go home and sit in front of the television, eating ice cream in a cardigan with egg on it. In that situation, if you just think to yourself, everyone feels the same. No one's thinking about me. They're panicking too. It just sort of grounds you. And yeah, I suppose I could go on, but I might bore you.
That's all
No,
great
those are
advice.
perfect pieces of
possible.
advice,
I love it.
especially the horse.
So, Helen, overall, what do you hope your readers will take away from reading your books?
Well, when I first wrote them, I didn't have a grand intention because it was so unintentional. But I think particularly with this last movie, I think if people take away a sense of the importance of kindness, fun as a concept, a sense of humor, good values, and community, and the ability to be emotionally honest with yourself and with other people and share your vulnerabilities, I think that would be something that made me really happy, because as the world gets scarier and scarier, it's these little communities that we make of like-minded people where we can get together at the end of the day and we can sort of say, "You'll never guess what just happened to me. Get me a glass of wine." And you wouldn't have to pretend that everything's great and everything's perfect. You bond through your humanity, really. And I don't know about you guys, but I've got a posse. We meet for coffee quite often in the mornings, and we just bring everything to the table and support each other. So if Bridget acts a little bit like that, like the friend you can be honest with about how sort of that you did leave a chicken in the oven,
Well, you're welcome
and
to
like,
join our little table anytime. We welcome you to our
thank
posse.
you. Thank you.
Finally, Helen, is there anything that you'd like to say to your readers?
I would like to say to the Gen Zs, come on, let's see your writing now, you guys, because I think they're a really interesting generation. And I think they've got a lot to say. And I hope they're all doing, developing their voices in different ways. I think what they do on social media is often really creative and interesting. And I just can't wait to see those novels flooding the bookshelves. I know some are already there, but I think, come on, guys, let's see it. Bring it on.
Helen has set the challenge.
All
Let's
right.
go.
Excited. Thank you.
Well, Helen Fielding, thank you so much for joining us today. We are grateful.
Oh, it's been lovely. Thank you. I'll go eat my chicken now.
What an amazing conversation with Helen Fielding.
She was, I think I'd like to invite her to my author dinner. She's so fun.
She was so funny, so open, and there was just so much that she brought to the energy of Bridget, but also what a career she's had, making all these books about refugees, and people be like, no. And then she finally writes Bridget Jones, and they're like, but is it serious? Is it literature? And I just felt like she really captured a perspective that I think still resonates, and she's so funny.
I agree. I also loved some of her takeaways, like to be surrounded by like-minded people, this concept of the importance of kindness. And I think one of the things that we've seen throughout our book club conversations is this thought of really building community and surrounding yourself with people who listen to you, truly listen to you, and help you to be, and help you to be an adult, especially as you grow, like we see Bridget growing.
Exactly.
What'd you think?
Being of that age at that time, I think there's some thread about reflecting on the mores of the time, the body image and the rest. And I have to say, in my lifetime, married women's names weren't put in papers. It was like Mrs. So-and-so. And in my lifetime, the Civil Rights Bill wasn't passed. And I think it's important for people who lived it to not assume they accepted it, but to give them accolades for being the change. And this is part of that change. And I love how she was just all about, this was a different time and this evolution moves on. I just felt like she has the tone just perfect.
Well, some snaps for that, Fred. That was
that
right there.
That's what she gave to me off of that. I mean, she was just really, I think, she even said one author was canceled. It's important not to cancel, just to reflect.
Yes.
And that's everything, everything happens in context. And that's really what I got from it, I think.
Yeah, well, I'd love to know what you thought. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. Did you take away anything from the interview? Great thing about books is that spark discussion, right?
Yes.
And I think there's been criticism of Bridget Jones. There's been people that have really appreciated her honesty and emotional vulnerability. I'd love to know where you stand on some of those thoughts. And I also loved her appreciation and inspiration from Jane Austen. I thought that was just, she had a lot to say about it, which was fun to hear.
Exactly, and I think that the things that make it, that have aged it are the things that are the most relevant, because the reality is we are still counting calories. There is still
Now it's just on TikTok.
It's just on TikTok, and we have apps for it, and we are so in the panopticon of being so seen in ways that we were not supposed to see everyone's faces all the time. And that does an impact on you, especially not just young women, but young men as well, who were for the first time ever really having those beauty standards put on them in a way that they haven't before. And I just think it speaks to just how society wants to shrink you up and you have to puff yourself out. Sometimes with a cigarette.
Yeah, sometimes. Did you also notice her call to Gen Z to be writers? And in this context now, in this world where everything's 30 seconds or 90 seconds on a platform, very deliberate about calling the next generation to write and see what they could do.
Find your voice.
Yeah, find your voice.
I love all of you. This
guys.
is so much fun. And thank you, book friends, for joining us for such a fun discussion.
And keep your love of reading thriving all month long when you join the PBS Books Readers Club Facebook group, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and to our e-newsletter at pbsbooks.org/subscribe.
And know that these PBS Books Author Talks rely on donations from viewers like you and me. Now more than ever, we need your support.
To join your book friends in supporting these events, just click the link in the description or comments or visit pbsbooks.org/donate.
You'll be taken to your local PBS station's donation page where you can find some PBS Books swag as our thanks for your donation. I am obsessed with the PBS Books Readers Club book bag. I use it to haul my library books home. It's so perfect.
Well, you can also get the official PBS Books mug, My Weekend is Booked, which is all too true.
And if you have a big heart for Jane Austen, like Helen does, become a member of your PBS station today to stream Austen-inspired PBS favorites like Miss Austen, which tells the story of Jane's sister Cassandra and why she burned all those letters.
Well, also Death Comes to Pemberley, which imagines what happens to Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy when their happy marriage is brought to an abrupt halt after a murder takes place at Pemberley. And of course, Sanditon, based on Jane Austen's final and unfinished novel. These and more are all available on PBS Passport, the member-exclusive section of the free PBS app.
Okay, book clubbers, it's time to reveal our book pick for next month. Heather, take it away.
Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, 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 dun.
Out of the new bag, I love it.
Thanks, Lauren. Our next pick is the brand new novel by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, The Bewitching.
Awesome.
It's so good.
It is so good.
So excited. I love Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I'm so excited for her book, The Bewitching. It weaves a chilling, multi-generational horror tale following three women across different eras. In 1990s Massachusetts, graduate student Minerva researches a forgotten horror author and uncovers unsettling parallels between the author's past, her great-grandmother's eerie childhood tales of witches in early 1900s Mexico, and her own life. As Minerva digs deeper, she suspects a sinister force has haunted her family for generations and may still be lurking around her.
And Heather, I think there's something else in there,
There is.
We're also going to discuss her bestseller, Mexican Gothic. If you read it, we'd love to know what you think, and we hope that you'll join us. This book follows a young socialite as she travels to a remote mansion in the Mexican countryside to rescue her newly married cousin from a mysterious threat. What begins as a rescue mission soon becomes a nightmarish struggle for survival. So creepy. Do you think that this might be a little different for some folks if you've never gotten into the horror genre? This is a really nice way to step into it, and it'll be just in time for spooky season too. So you think our book clubbers will like these?
I'm so excited. I worship Mexican Gothic. I think it's a brilliant book. I think the setting is unique. I think that the main character is just so wonderful. Like, it's beautiful, it's gross in all the best ways. If you love sort of like Jane Eyre or anything in the spooky genre, you'll love this.
But this is the thing, I don't like that. And I love this.
Well, there you go.
Right? So this is something.
I'm a non-believer.
Well, right. Like, I'm not, those of you who watch me on PBS Books, every time I interview a horror author, I'm like, oh. But no, I love this. This is so good. It is just everything you want out of a novel. And then this, it keeps you guessing, it keeps you engaged. It's incredible.
Yep.
Well, there's so much more to discuss about The Bewitching and Mexican Gothic. We will do that with author Sylvia Moreno Garcia on September 24th. RSVP now to our Facebook Live event by searching for PBS Books on Facebook and looking under events.
Sign up for the PBS Books e-newsletter at pbsbooks.org/subscribe to make sure you get great book recommendations straight to your inbox.
And subscribe to our YouTube channel for more amazing reads and hundreds of author interviews.
We'll see you next time. Thank you for being a part of the PBS Books Readers Club.